Happy Friday to you all, Bengals fans. It is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast coming at you with a preview of Week 8 with the Eagles coming to town to visit the Cincinnati Bengals. Exciting matchup, exciting interconference matchup, a lot of offensive firepower, we think, on display this week. We've got some things to talk about in terms of the injury report, and unfortunately one of those aspects is regarding the gentleman that you saw in the video opener there sitting next to John smiling. So we'll have to talk about that in just a second. I'm Anthony Cosenza. I mentioned his first name, John, not his last name, John Sheeran. And how you doing, buddy? It's Friday. There's a big game ahead and some good news and some bad news as it pertains to the Bengals getting set to take on the Eagles.
Well, the good news is we've been extremely busy this week giving you guys content. We had a great show Monday. We had a great interview with Sam Hubbard on Tuesday as he was promoting Campbell's Chunky and his partnership with Free Start Food Bank and everything like that. So it's been great in terms of just, talking about wins and just giving you guys content. But yeah, man, this matchup has been circled on the calendar for quite some time as the Eagles are one of the best teams in the NFC, a team that the Bengals don't get to play that often, a team that's going to play against the Bengals wearing an undefeated uniform combination. But yeah, we got a surprise problem that kind of emerged Friday, and it's not a new problem, I guess, though, unfortunately.
Not a new problem, but when this problem pops up from a mile high view, it's usually not good news for the result of the game for the Bengals. We'll talk about that. We'll talk about key matchups that play into that, what we see on the injury report. So let's just start there, man. Injury report. Let's start with the good news because I don't want to be Debbie Downer right away here. The good news is the two guys that suffered what seemed to be pretty severe looking or seeming injuries last week, two starters, one on each side of the ball, Geno Stone, the safety, and Orlando Brown Jr., the offensive tackle. Both of those guys are basically cleared to play now. Orlando Brown Jr. has had the knee/calf issue, whatever you want to call that. And then, Geno Stone had that shin problem where it almost looked like, man, did he break one of the bones in his legs there? Avoided that, and both look like they're going to play.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, it's not funny because he's hurt, but like with Orlando Brown, it was first thought of to be a knee injury, right? Because that's what they were looking at. He looked like he was walking on it gingerly. And then after the game, it was classified as a calf injury. And then after that, it was then said like, it's his upper calf, like behind his leg, but it's mostly going to affect his knee. So they officially classified it as a knee sprain, and he was limited the first 2 days of practice, and then he had a full day of practice on Friday. As for Geno Stone, who looked like he suffered the more serious injury because he got carted off, that was essentially what is a shin contusion, just a mighty bruise on his shin, and he's going to be sore, and he probably was sore for most of this week. He didn't practice Wednesday, and then he had like the most gradual progression in terms of practice participation that you can get. So he didn't practice Wednesday, he was limited Thursday, and he was a full participant Friday, along with 52 other players for the Bengals roster. I think you muted, man.
Here is the injury report here for the Bengals and the Eagles. Eagles a bit more extensive, but they do have a lot of other players that are set to suit up, it would seem here. You look at Orlando Brown Jr., you see here limited, full. Joe Burrow, of course, full practice. They talk about the wrist. That's going to probably be a weekly thing going forward. They gave Trace Hendrickson non-injury rest rather on Wednesday, and then he went full. Man, that guy's a warrior. He's battled through a lot of different stuff here. And then Chris Jenkins went full. He's still dealing with that thumb injury. He had surgery on it a couple of weeks ago. And then Geno Stone, we talked about him, but the big one there, T. Higgins, who was not on the injury report Wednesday and Thursday, and then he was limited on Friday, making him questionable. We'll talk more about that in just a second. And then on the Philadelphia side of the ball, my friend, Saquon was limited, but he was fine the rest of the week. Same with Zach Bond, Becton, Goddard, Brandon Graham, the ageless wonder, on the injury report. He was limited, but all these guys seem to be. I think, unless I'm missing something here, I don't know that they're going to be missing many of those guys on the Eagles side of the ball. So, of course, Saquon's the one that the biggest name on there. Goddard is another big one. So going to have to see exactly what happens with all those guys. But let's just kind of go into the T. Higgins thing. We've talked already a lot, John, about how different this team is and how different Jamar Chase is with T. Higgins on the field. And there were some highlight plays that we witnessed. I know earlier today, Dan Orlovsky of ESPN, he kind of put out a little film deal on Burrow and some of his throws, but one of those throws featured a spectacular leaping, full extension grab by T. Higgins across the middle for a big gain. He just makes the tough plays, the tough catches across the middle. Questionable doesn't mean he's not playing. It just doesn't seem like a good thing when he was not on the injury report at the beginning of the week and then pops up Friday, the last possible day.
Yeah, it's what happened in week one or right before week one. He was listed with a hamstring injury on Thursday. He told reporters that day that, he's going to be fine. And of course, it's very rarely that players are completely honest about their current injury status. And he ended up not practicing on Friday. He missed 2 weeks with the hamstring injury. It is not the first time that he suffered a soft tissue injury in his legs, and it probably won't be the last time because now he's got a quad injury, which is another muscle in your leg. So it's far from new from him and for the Bengals to be dealing with this. And the fact that he was limited Friday, we can pretty much guarantee that it happened during practice, and that's why he was limited. So as close to the weekend as possible, as close to Sunday as possible, gives him the worst possible timing of getting enough rest in to make sure that he's able to play. And again, just looking at the history here of how many times that these soft tissue injuries have come up for him, very rarely have these types of injuries happened the week of the game and he's been able to play. And I think we can kind of the assumption right now is that he probably isn't going to play if this popped up because of the history here, because there's never been any indication that the team would want to rush him back under any circumstances because of how many times this has come up for him. So it's truly, sad and unfortunate that this keeps happening, but because of the timing here, you just have to assume that it's more likely than not that he misses Sunday now because of the timing here.
Well, yeah, that's it's a disheartening way to look at it. And obviously, he missed the first 2 games this year, both losses for the Bengals. Again, this offense, Jamar Chase and everything just is completely different, looks completely different. It's not to say I don't have all of the games in front of me because this was kind of such a late ad. We can dig back a little bit to see exactly what the Bengals record is without T. Higgins. I know they have, at least I'm pretty sure they've won games without him in there, with Chase in there, but it is lopsided, if memory serves correctly, in terms of the win-losses without a T. Higgins in the lineup, at least this iteration of the Bengals from 21 on, when they got Chase in the lineup and on. So again, this is the deal as to why the Bengals have hesitated potentially on paying him the big deal. This is what's going to be the knock on him if and when he enters outside free agency. It's just these handful of games every year. It ranges from about 2 or 3 to sometimes upwards of, what was it, a year ago, like 6, something like that. They just pop up, and it's just something that comes with having a talented player like T. Higgins on your roster. You also get these injuries that pop up and cause him to miss a game here and there. And look, I understand I understand what you're saying about, the Bengals want to play cautious here. Don't want to rush them back if they don't need to. It's an interconference game. It doesn't, necessarily affect the records, but you got to win as many as you can right now. And you have to climb back towards 500 and or above. You have to, get what you can and hopefully get back to evening the series out against the Ravens in a couple of weeks. Maybe that's the focus this week is just, we're going to play the long game with it, even if it's sacrificing this week. But if he does not play, I mean, he's questionable. He's not doubtful or out. If he does not play, the Bengals are going to need to come up with all kinds of different contingency plans. And this is what worries me too about it, John. When we've seen this pop up late in the week, whether it is with T. Higgins or Jamar Chase, the offensive game plan looks like a disaster. Yeah. When we look like, because all of a sudden you got to scratch everything you've prepared for with that player in there all week. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, that player's not in there. We saw it against the Patriots. The offense was a mess. We saw it a couple of years ago when Chase had the groin deal, right? And he had to miss a month. That game going into Cleveland, or I can't remember if it was at home or away, but against Cleveland, that was an abject disaster on Halloween when he was hurt in that one right at the end of the week. That's what worries me the most going into this one. I mean, obviously his health is of paramount, but that's really what worries me for this specific game if he does not play.
It's a great point because I remember just last year, like he didn't play against the Cardinals in week 5 because he suffered like the rib injury in week 4 of the week prior. And the Bengals offense, like that was their first like legitimately good game because Joe Burrow kind of came back and looked like his normal self. And I think a couple weeks later, like they played the Houston Texans at home without T. Higgins, and like that was after T played really well against the Bills. And the Bengals offense was still, pretty decent. Was able to move the ball down the field. So like last year when T was suffering some of these injuries, like the offense was still competent in some of those weeks. And we saw in the first 2 weeks, albeit like against the Chiefs, like they were fine offensively. But like you said, when they were preparing for the entire week of week 1 against the Patriots, and then all of a sudden he wasn't out there, and there was just next to nothing that they could do in the passing game, and there was no flow and rhythm and consistency with it, and you weren't getting any separation from any other receiver aside from Jamar Chase, who at the time didn't even practice either, right? He was just coming off of just holding out for his contract. So at least this year, you're totally right. Like the plan without T. Higgins in terms of like just kind of springing upon themselves and kind of adjusting as they go, it's not been good, and his value on the field has been extremely evident in these 5 games. Like he's right now averaging the most like receptions per game in his career. He's got the highest yards per game average in his career aside from 2021. So he's playing his best football, and he's one of the main reasons why this offense has had any life in it over the past 2 weeks, because he's the other guy aside from Jamar Chase who can win against one-on-one coverage. And that's what is the biggest worry for me this week, because this is arguably the best trio of cornerbacks that you're going to face in quite some time with Quinyon Mitchell, Darius Slay, and Cooper DeJean. You have one guy in Jamar Chase, who obviously is one of the best, if not the best receiver in the NFL, who you can have confidence in winning those one-on-one matchups. Jermaine Burton hasn't proven that yet. Trent Irwin hasn't proven that yet, or he has proved that he can't do it. Andre Yoshivas hasn't proven that he can do it yet. You have a ton of unknowns that you're going to have to rely on if you don't have T out there. And again, like you said, Jermaine Burton hasn't been getting these reps this week because T has practiced for two of the 3 days. Neither is Trent Irwin, or Yoshi is still getting those reps as the third receiver, but you're asking for more of him now if T is out. So it's very unsettling how they're going to be able to handle this now.
Yeah. You look at it. I mean, Burrow's success this season against, what's going to give here? Is it Burrow and his record against NFC and what he's done this year against NFC teams type of thing? Is that going to step up? Is that going to be a little bit, is that going to take precedence over the loss or missing of T. Higgins? I don't know. But I think it was Rob doing some great work for us. He looked up StatMuse here. Bengals have a record of 4-6 without T. Higgins all time, according to StatMuse. Not good, but they have gotten by without him, and it's going to take a number of other players stepping up to do that. And if he does not play, it's also going to take the coaching staff stepping up to alter the game plan in an effective way. I mean, there's so many different directions you could take of kind of where we're going to go next in a few minutes, which is, who needs to step up, the key matchups, all this kind of stuff. If T. Higgins is out, there's so many different directions you could take this, but disheartening news. I mean, you started to feel good about the Stone and Brown injuries as the week went on. And then all of a sudden this came up, around midday, my time, late morning, midday, my time, mid-afternoon for you guys. And it's just like deflating. Now, again, not out, not doubtful. It's probably, usually questionable is about 50-50, but that scale tends to trend a little bit further downward when it's so late in the week and nothing was noted prior to Friday.
And I just want to clarify because I did chuckle looking at the CJ post. I know that Jason put it in we'll update the post if hopefully the Eagles update the injury report. They have updated the injury report, and officially 3 players of the Eagles are out. Tight end Dallas Goedert is out with a hamstring. Mekhi Becton, the right guard, he's out with a concussion, and the rotational defensive tackle Byron Young, he's out with a hamstring. Everyone else for the Eagles are a go, but that's 3 players for the Eagles who are going to be out. 2 of them being starters and 1 rotational guy. And on the flip side, I just want to obviously we're talking about T and his history, but Orlando Brown has a very positive injury history. I just wanted to shout this out because the only game that he's ever missed in his NFL career was the Chiefs' first game against the Bengals in 2021. Obviously the thriller that won the Bengals the AFC North, and he was out because he got injured in warmups. He's never been on injured reserve, and he's never, I don't think he's ever missed a full week of practice and ended up missing a game. So for him to suffer what seemed to be an injury that could take him out this week, and then to practice all 3 days and to be ready to go, man, it's a testament to just such a rare just a rare physical specimen. Let's put it frank, for being 6'8", 345, 350 pounds, and for how durable he is. He deserves all the credit for his routine, his recovery, and everything that he does to make sure that he's available every single week. It is truly a marvel for just a guy that rare of a size to never really miss a game. It's incredible.
Very well said. So as we noted, T. Higgins, Bengals without T. Higgins reportedly are 4-6 according to StatMuse. Joe Burrow in his career, John, if we're talking about what's going to give in terms of records and all this kind of stuff, Joe Burrow in his career against the NFC, 12-6-1. Would you like to know who that one tie came against?
We know what it is. We know who it is.
Yeah. Philadelphia Eagles in 2020. And so that is where we stand at this point. We'll see what happens with Higgins, but we're going to play a little bit of a game here in a second where you go, okay, key matchups or key things in this game with T. Higgins in the lineup and without. So, I mean, let's just say for the sake of argument, right now it's about 40% chance he plays, given the fact that it's a late week injury. He is questionable, not doubtful, out. We'll just kind of say 40-ish% probably is around where I would put the odds, at least. So we'll talk about that in just a second. But this is the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast, part of the Believe, BLEAV podcast network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, where you can get this show. You can get Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz, giving you hot takes, breaking down film, all that good stuff on that show. You can get this show on a variety of different platforms, whether it is on the video streaming side. We go live on our YouTube channel, in which you can subscribe to that by going to the show icon underneath the bottom right-hand side of the screen. Click the subscribe button, click the bell, all that good stuff. Do what you got to do to get access to our YouTube channel, as well as streaming on a couple of different Twitter accounts. And of course, the audio side, we're on all the major audio platforms. You have to go to the Believe in Cincy, BLEAV in Cincy podcast channel, resubscribe to that feed. The old Cincy Jungle feed is no longer putting up new episodes. So you're going to need to go to that to get all of the podcast episodes. Leave us a review as well. We appreciate that. And one thing that is on the video side only, and my co-host was too humble to bring it up, is he gave us a nice brief video breakdown of some stuff going on with Joseph Osai in his game against the Browns. Little film breakdown. We're going to try and get more of those to you on the YouTube channel. So all the more reason to get a little bit more, get some subscriptions over to the YouTube channel. That being said, let's play the game of because I think it's a little easier if we say, okay, who needs to step up in this one if T. Higgins does play. I think it's that makes it a little bit easier because then you go, okay, this is the offense as it should be, and that sort of thing, and all the parts are there. So let's play that one. Who on offense would need to step up? Whether it is A.T. Higgins again, whether it is, Jamar Chase or just kind of some obvious people, or are there some other people or position groups that you're looking at that need to pull a little bit more weight this week?
Regardless of their health of receiver, they need some sort of life in the run game. And right now it's just Chase Brown doing everything that he possibly can. And he's still, it's never going to be to the point where he gets 20 carries. Cause I think I don't think they're going to run the ball that much. And B, if they do, it's not going to be entirely on Chase Brown. So I look to Zach Moss, man, like his efficiency since the first 3 weeks of the season has been in the toilet, and they've been extremely one-dimensional since. It's a great reason, a great factor as to why their offense has been kind of stuck in the mud over the past couple of weeks. And against this front for the Eagles, like they're pretty, I want to say middle of the road, like they're slightly above average against the run, and it's still a Bengals offensive line that I think is very matchup based and dependent, depending on whether or not they can generate movement in the ground game. And especially when you have Orlando Brown Jr., who may not be 100% for this game, and he's obviously one of your better run blockers. So the emphasis on Zach Moss just creating on his own and doing more than what's been given to him, like that's very important. I think it's going to be a very telling and turning point game for him, because this could be the week where Chase Brown just takes like the absolute majority lion's share of the carries just because he's doing more with them. So it's going to be hard even with T. Higgins out there, because the Eagles secondary is still like a strength of this team, and that cornerback group can go toe to toe with the Bengals receiver group. So there's going to be some type of pressure on the run game to just kind of pull their weight, because they haven't in the past couple weeks. And I look towards Chase Brown doing what he's been doing for the past couple weeks, but Zach Moss needs to return to that early week efficiency for sure.
Yeah, it's what was it last week? 6 carries, 7 yards, or vice versa. I mean, it just was not going well for him. And granted, I know they like him for the pass protection element, and he gives you a little bit more than you think in the receiving game. But still, primary job is to get the tough yards, get yards on the ground, sustain drives. And the Bengals have kind of lost that. They had a couple of weeks spell where it was looking pretty decent. Obviously, Chase Brown has been the more explosive player, as you noted, but that needs to get better for sure. This answer might be for either way with T. Higgins for me. And, I gotta, I don't know if soft spots right, but I have a lot of respect for the tight end position, just because they are some of the best athletes on the football field and what they do. And they're asked to do a lot of stuff between blocking and receiving and all kinds of different things. That group last week had, I think, 4 targets to 4 different players. They had 1 catch for 2 yards. So whether, and it was to Eric All, who had been, catching everything up until the Giants game that was thrown his way. He caught every target his way. Now the last 2 targets his way, I think, were not caught, but or he's had 2 in the last 2 games rather that were not caught. Regardless, pretty hard to sustain 100% catch rate. But I think between him, Sample had a pass that wasn't completed. I think it was either Hudson or Gesicki who had the catch. But regardless, that group, with the pass catchers that they have in that group, they need to step up. And I think, whether that is because the Eagles defense is playing a little bit better than, I think some people thought, whether Higgins is in the lineup and they are bracketing Higgins and Chase and kind of clamping down on them, they need other ancillary weapons to step up. Otherwise, if Higgins does not play, they for sure need to be contributing at a much, much higher level than we saw last week, because they're kind of too talented not to. I know they're young. I know there's a lot of new faces there in terms of McLaughlin and All and Gesicki, but they gotta show more there. And so that, to me, whether or not Higgins plays, that is a position group that needs to step up this week. And also, to your point a little bit too, not just receiving the ball, but Eric All was kind of a pivotal player in those couple of weeks where the Bengals were running the ball a little bit better. sustaining some nice blocks. So he and Sample will also need to be on their game on that front too, to get the run game back on track.
Yeah, and shout out to, I believe it is Rob Duncan, who said he does bring up a good point, because Chase Brown's twin brother Sidney Brown does play for the Eagles, and he made his debut last week. He's not going to start. I think Reed Blankenship and Chauncey Gardner-Johnson are your starting safeties there, but I can imagine that Sidney Brown would be pretty motivated to say, "Hey, coaches, let me get some snaps here. I want to tackle my twin brother." So whenever both those guys are on the field, they're going to be going 150% at each other. But you got a good point with the tight ends, because right now Mike Gesicki is tight end 3, and I think when the first depth chart came out, you had Gesicki below Drew Sample, and I think a lot of people were like, "That's not entirely accurate. The depth chart is very rarely 100%. The coaches don't even look at it," but it's extremely reflective on what the snaps have been, what the roles for those guys have been, because Mike Gesicki is just not as big of a factor in this passing game as a lot of people thought he would be. I don't know if it's been slowly phasing him out for Eric Gall. Maybe there's a lack of trust that has kind of been lost ever since week 2, when he had a really good game against the Chiefs. Like, there was that one play against the Panthers where he was wide open and Burrow didn't even look his way. And that could just be, a bad play by Burrow, but there's a history of guys who typically don't get looks because they're not doing enough to earn the trust of the quarterback's eye. And it's been very evident that he's like the third guy in that group behind All and Sample. And those two, obviously, you would expect the most receiving production out of all, and they just haven't really featured him down the field outside of a lot of checkdowns and him just trying to make something work after the catch. And he's not really making a lot of guys miss. Like, he's gaining yards after contact, but they need to get him out into space. They need to allow him to stretch the field a little bit more if they're not going to do that with the Gesicki. But I do agree, though. Like, this would be a great game just to get Gesicki kind of back involved and kind of test this Eagles' second level of defense.
Yeah, and I think Gesicki had a nice catch or two against the Ravens as well, when the Bengals were he had that one kind of, I think it was an angle route towards the sideline or something like that, where he kind of toe tapped and got it in. That was a nice play, but they've been kind of few and far between, and he needs to be more integrated in the offense. And I think just to go on the other side of the ball, I'll give you, well, I mean, I guess I could go all 3 phases, but I'll go with the defensive side of the ball for the time being, and that is, I guess specifically DJ Turner. You can say all the cornerbacks, because they have a tall test this week with Devontae Smith and AJ Brown, et cetera. They've got a tall task this week to cover those great wide receivers when Hurts is on. It's funny to see. I don't know if you've been paying attention to what Eagles fans are thinking about Jalen Hurts at this point. I did a 5 questions with their Bleeding Green Nation, and I just happened to glance over there to look at the comments, because I just want to not that I do that a lot, but I just wanted to actually see that the article was posted to link it and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, I'm just going to scroll down to the comments and see. And, I had been kind of complimentary of Hurts, saying, when he's on, he's one of the more electric players in the league, et cetera. And I still stand by that. But some of the Eagles fans are saying, it's funny that the author, said that he called Jalen Hurts electric, but Eagles fans look at him as maybe potentially the guy who's holding them back at times. So it's this weird dichotomy between, I guess, what we see outside of the Eagles bubble, or what we feel outside of the Eagles bubble, and what they feel like inside of it. But regardless, I mean, we've seen Hurts make a lot of plays as a pro. I mean, there's no doubt about it. And those wide receivers are excellent. And so, I mean, DJ Turner stepping in for Dax Hill. There's been some good, particularly against the Giants, that nice pass breakup at the end of that game. There's been some ups and downs too, but obviously this defense has been ascending the past few weeks. So the corners have to be on point. The defense as a whole, this is going to be a nice test for them to see, hey, were the last couple of weeks or the last few wins that they've collected, was that more of a little bit of the fool's gold thing and not great offenses, not quarterbacks not playing well, or is it a sign that they are healthier, they're getting things together? Are you muted?
We're 1 for 1 today with that.
Yeah, you and I. We're the battle of the mute mics. Yeah.
So Daniel Jones and Deshaun Watson, DTR, are not the greatest collection of quarterbacks. Like, Jalen Hurts is not a world beater, but he's better than those guys. And so, like, there's new challenges with that, and he can also make plays with his legs. Obviously, defending Saquon Barkley is going to be priority number 1, because he's one of the best running backs in the league. I think there's confidence in at least limiting the in between the tackles carries, because they've done a good job with that between both Derrick Henry and Nick Chubb. And I think with the Eagles' offensive line a little bit banged up, like that's going to be Fred Johnson, old friend at left tackle. So he's still kicking it. And for Jordan Mailata, you're gonna have a backup right guard in for Mekhi Becton, who's also just a mammoth. So he's going to be missing the run game too. So I don't know if the Eagles are going to have to rely on more of the passing game, because I think the Bengals have a decent chance of at least limiting Saquon from popping off in this one. But I think in the secondary, it's going to be really interesting to see what they do with both DJ Turner and Mike Hilton, because ever since AJ Brown has returned, like Devontae Smith has taken the majority of his snaps in the slot, and obviously that's where Mike Hilton is. And I think I would much rather have DJ Turner following Devontae Smith into the slot than have Mike Hilton there, just from an athleticism standpoint. Yeah, like I don't trust Mike Hilton trying to just play off coverage on Devontae Smith or play bump and run against him. I just don't think that's where he's going to thrive. So if they decide to have DJ Turner follow him around, or just go into the slot whenever he sees him on his side of the field, because I feel like Cam Taylor-Britt is going to be locked in with AJ Brown, very reminiscent to what he did against DK Metcalf this time last year, when I think they had him like trailing around. But it's been a different approach, I think, in the secondary this year without Dax Hill, and I think they've tried to simplify their cornerbacks' roles a little bit. But again, if Devonta Smith is going up against Mike Hilton, if I'm Jalen Hurts, I'm looking that way pretty much 9 times out of 10. Devonta Smith is such a unique athlete, and that's a clear mismatch, I think, in favor of the Eagles. So DJ Turner might be their only hope of making sure that if Cam Taylor-Britt and AJ Brown are going blow for blow, and there's good plays made on both sides of the ball, the difference could be Devonta Smith. So how the Bengals kind of manage that and make sure that he's limited when he's in the slot, that's going to be very fascinating for me to watch.
That's a good point. That's a good point there. And then I don't know if this is. He's always a key player, but I just am going to ask the question to you. Where's your head at with Evan McPherson right now? There's been a couple of misses of late, some of them long, obviously the botched hold and all that kind of stuff. I don't know. I feel like we were down this road. Was it last year or the year prior when he was kind of missing some? And then I think it was maybe 22, where he was missing some. And then all of a sudden he was, excellent in the postseason again, all that kind of stuff. But is this again, just almost kicker taking on a little bit of the how the team is, where it's like slow and ebbs and flows? I guess we just get a little spoiled with him, but there's a little bit of a dry spell happening, particularly with those long kicks that we've become accustomed to.
Yeah. And again, like, I think a lot of his misses have always come like early in the year for whatever reason. So maybe he's just a reflection, like you said, of just the team. And yeah, like if the weather's fine, like I don't go into a game if the conditions are fine thinking that Evan McPherson is going to miss like a bunch of key kicks. And obviously it hasn't happened every single week, but it has happened more often than not over the past couple of weeks. I think this would be a very bad week for him to have a dud, considering who the other kicker is. And I think Jake Elliott is always going to haunt the Bengals at least a little bit. But yeah, that's Jake Elliott on the other side, and he's year, I think, 8, and it's like 3rd contract with the Eagles. So he's always been really good for them. And there could be situations where the Eagles offense might stall out. And I think Elliott is about as automatic as you can get from distance. And that's exactly why the Bengals drafted him in the 5th round. And for whatever reason, didn't keep him. But yeah, great kicker matchup, I would say. And yeah, I think with McPherson, though, like there's confidence in him until it continues to happen. But I think over the past years, he's been able to figure out as the season kind of enters the midpoint and then onward.
Yeah, he's 10 of 13. The 2 misses have come. It was last week against Cleveland. There was a miss. And then, of course, a couple weeks prior. So he has 2 misses in the last 3 weeks. The other miss being the botch snap long one in Baltimore, against Baltimore, rather. And then the other miss was in week 3 against Washington. And then he had a missed extra point against the Chiefs. Unfortunately, each one of those loomed large. And a lot of times if you're, you have a lead or, you can kind of get past it. I mean, one was in overtime against the Ravens that you miss and you ultimately lose that game. Last week, the Bengals were able to overcome that, but it made the ending a little bit more tenuous than it needed to be, regardless of the, it's a 1 possession game. It turned out to be. And then, miss against Washington in a game that was decided by 5 points, 6 points, something like that. So, I mean, they always sting to some degree, but these misses have, and then of course the extra point miss against Kansas City too. So, I mean, they all sting to some degree, but they have just seemingly the misses, even though they're not super frequent, they've just stung a bit more, I think, than usual because of either imperfections on defense or on offense, depending on which game you're looking at.
Yeah, I just remember now. Looking at the numbers right now, it was 2022 when he just had like a complete lull in the middle of the season. He went, I think,
That's
4 weeks. He went 4 weeks without making a kick because he didn't attempt one against the Falcons 1 week, and then he missed one against the Browns. He missed an extra point in that game, and then he missed his only field goal against the Panthers. So he didn't make a field goal from week 7 to 10 because they had a week 10 bye week, and then he only missed one kick for the remainder of the year. I think one extra point. So yeah, like for kickers, it's completely mental. Obviously, he's been proven to be accurate everywhere that he's been able to kick. And I think it's just a matter of just kind of getting out of that mental lull. And I think he's proven to do that. So I wouldn't be surprised if it happens this week.
Yeah, we'll hope for that. And of course, I mean, the other element too, and we'll get to some other things, predictions, and get out of here in just a little bit. But the other thing with that too, I mean, you look at how many different punters he has had in his short career with the Bengals, hence different holders. And so that has an effect on things. Ryan Rico is having an outstanding year punting the football. Of course, that, botched hold against the Ravens looms a little bit large there though. But let's, unless are there other matchups or players you've got your eye on, John, that you want to talk about before we kind of talk about how we see this thing going?
Yeah, I briefly mentioned it, but I mean, Trey Hendrickson versus Fred Johnson is the most lopsided matchup that you're going to see from a Bengals perspective this year. And I love Fred Johnson, such a great dude, and I think a very valuable backup. But when you're asking him to start against one of the better edge rushers in the league, especially a guy who is very proficient in his pass rushing plan, like Fred Johnson, he's got some athletic ability, he's got plenty of his size, but his hand usage has never been the best, and that's a clear good matchup for Trey Hendrickson. And yeah, like the entire Bengals defensive line, it's the healthiest it's been. Chris Jenkins continues to get healthier. Obviously, BJ Hill, Shelton Rankins, the more that they play since their hamstring injuries, the same with Sam Hubbard. Like that unit is definitely firing, and it's not the same Eagles offensive line that took them to the Super Bowl. Obviously, Jason Kelsey's no longer there. They have two starters who are down right now, and Cam Jurgens is very athletic for a center, but he doesn't have the same veteran savvy that Jason Kelsey had. So it's not the same type of juggernaut unit that has been there in the years past. So when you're talking about a quarterback in Jalen Hurts who doesn't necessarily do his best passing over the middle and sometimes comes to pressure, this is a good opportunity for that Bengals defense line to kind of keep things going and keep them in the game in case the Bengals offense stalls out for a third straight week.
It's a great point. And I will finally do one. The matchups or, players that I've mentioned have been kind of, well, whether or not T plays. This is especially true if he does not play. I'm surprised we haven't really talked about this. I mean, Yoshi, Burton. Yep. I mean, do we see Burton if Higgins does not play? Do we finally see a little bit more of Burton? He was on the field for 3 snaps last week, and they were all the kneel downs. So, I mean, if there is no Higgins, Yoshi's stepped up at times when called, but he's had some dry spells as well. Just because when Chase and Higgins are healthy out there and they're rolling, give them the ball, right? I mean, that's just how it goes. But I think especially this week, if Higgins does not play, this is a huge ask for Yoshi. And then potentially, do you have Burton ascend to a little bit of, hey, get out there a handful of more snaps, just do a go route, and play recess ball, right? Just throw one up to him because he's, let him beat somebody. I don't know, but that's what we saw a little bit against Kansas City, and he came down with a big one in that one.
Yeah, it's the fact that for both Yoshi and Burton, they've only won in like very, very limited spurts, and there's only very specific situations where they've had success. They haven't had like complete games yet, and especially for Burton because he's only played in like 2. The only guy behind these 2 starters that's had a complete game in the past is Trenton Irwin, and he's been a healthy scratch for a good part of this year because he just doesn't have that juice that you can rely on to beat man coverage, and especially in this matchup. Like if I'm Quinyon Mitchell or Darius Slay, I'm just not afraid of Trenton Irwin. I don't think he's getting over the top of me. I think he might win a couple of contested catches. He might get a back shoulder. Like that's something that him and Joe Burrow have been able to connect on in years past. But right now, like if the guy that you trust the most out of those 3 is Trenton Irwin, it's definitely advantaged Eagles. So this is a huge opportunity. If T Higgins doesn't play for both Burden and Yosivas to have their best, most complete games of their career because they absolutely need to.
Yeah. Well, we'll wait with bated breath about what's going on with T. Higgins, and I'm sure that's going to be a game time thing going forward. And he'll probably test it out, see if he can go, and figure it out from there. But the Bengals need to have contingency plans in place now with a late week injury to T. Higgins. How do you see this? I mean, obviously, this is the same question with T. Higgins, without T. Higgins. How do you see this one going?
Man, I don't think the Bengals win this one. I think ultimately, if I were to guess right now, T doesn't play, and there's just not enough proof of concept for this receiving core outside of Jamar Chase to do enough to be a better offense than they have been in the past 2 weeks. Like they've gone up against two really good defenses, two really good defensive coordinators with both T and Jamar out there, and they're only able to score 14 points on offense in each game. And now you're going up against an equally competent defense with an even better secondary, a pass rush that is still athletic, that can still give the Bengals offensive line some problems. I don't see this offense truly figuring things out this week, especially not without their best player. I don't think the Eagles are going to run all over the Bengals. I think that's the matchup that everyone's really scared about with Saquon. And obviously Saquon's a phenomenal running back, but I do think that this run defense for the Bengals has taken leaps and bounds forward since they've gotten healthier. I think they'll do a decent job against Saquon. He might brag off a couple of ones and he might have a decent game, but it's not going to be just a complete, run all over them. And again, like Jalen Hurts, fine quarterback in some ways, but it's just a matter of if Cam Taylor-Britt's going to be the Panthers version or the Chiefs version. And obviously those are two very different guys, but I think he'll be up for the challenge against A.J. Brown. So I kind of see not a low scoring game, but I see like a Eagles 23, Bengals 17 type game.
And that is based on your belief that T. Higgins won't be playing, correct? Yeah. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So if T. Higgins plays, I think the Bengals win a close one in this one. And I would go around the same. I'd like 26, 21, 20, 27, 23, something like that. I think it would be an entertaining game. I think that would, and it's possible he plays. I don't want to say, just doom and gloom all the time here, but it is still possible with a questionable designation that he plays. It's just that late week thing is just not good. And so to me, if he does not play, I do not think the Bengals win. I think the evidence, this is not a Bengals offense and I'm not going to, I don't want to have people come out of the woodwork and say, why are you talking about former players and all that kind of stuff? Let's just go back a couple of years in time and say, when T. Higgins is out of the lineup, you have Jamar Chase. Well, you also had a productive running back in Joe Mixon there. You did have Tyler Boyd to lean on. Granted, tight ends were a little fluid in some of those years and in some of those games where Higgins missed, but you felt a little bit better about the running back situation at that point in time, as well as Tyler Boyd maybe being a bigger part of the game plan, that sort of thing. It's a little, granted, you like what you have at tight end this year more than you maybe did the past couple of years, but and then the whole late week and making that adjustment on the fly so late in the week, I don't like that. If T. Higgins doesn't play, I would say probably a somewhat similar score that I predicted the other way if he played, 27-21 type of thing in favor of the Eagles. So I hate to say that, the result of the game resides on one player like that, particularly when he is technically your number 2 wide receiver, but he is such a big piece of what they do. It's not just him being a good number 2 wide receiver. It is him opening things up for Jamar Chase. It is opening things up for other players in the passing game and just making tough catches that a lot of other players on that team cannot regularly make. So I just think that's where his value is. And I think this is also another good example, another good litmus test for the Bengals as they look to potentially pay Chase and or Higgins long-term. You got to see the product on the field when those guys are there and when they are not there. And that should be your barometer as a team and figure out ways to pay them. So I'm not saying I hope the Bengals lose if T. Higgins doesn't play, but if that is what comes to fruition, it's another thing that the Bengals need to take note of in terms of long-term contract negotiations going forward.
Oh, those bullet points are stacking up. And the more examples like this that happen, because T is just such a unique case of like someone who's so valuable, but there is a fair counter in terms of his durability that would make you pause if you were to give him the long-term contract that you want. But again, until the Bengals find a way to either replace him or show the ability to replace him, because right now it doesn't look like Jermaine Burton is even close to being ready for that, and there's still a lot that Yoshi needs to prove in that regard. Bengals have their hands tied, and I feel bad because I did a video on T. Higgins literally yesterday about how he's playing so well that the Bengals might feel like they need to franchise tag him again because they don't want to.
It was you. You did it.
Listen, Kay Adams had an interview with him too. I feel like we were all in on this jinx. We all need to take, be culpable and have some responsibility here.
Yeah.
But it's such a unique case with him, and I really do feel for him to continue to go through these very similar issues. And I think he even mentioned that like it was Christian Watson who I think ran or did some type of test with, or had some type of procedure done with a doctor to make sure that both his legs and his hamstrings were like on equal footing, so that you were able to like treat them better or make sure that they weren't getting like pulled or whatnot as frequently. And he said he would be open to that in the offseason. So I really hope that, something does happen and goes the right way for him, because I would hate to see this happen for the rest of his career, because he's such a great dude and obviously so valuable to this team.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's drop the mic and get on out of here. We got through a lot, and a lot of it centered around 585 T. Higgins. So what do you got for us on the way out, John?
Nothing much. Just if you haven't listened to our interview with Sam Hubbard, go back to it earlier this week. Gave a lot of valuable insight about finally winning in Cleveland, his process evolving as his career has gone on, and a bunch of other nuggets like that. So always pumping out great content for you guys, and it's been a busy week for us. So check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. And as I mentioned, another little tip of the cap there to you, John, I know you put them out on Twitter and a lot of people eat them up, but we're going to try and get some more of those, brief film breakdowns on specific players on the YouTube channel. And so go check that out. That's not going to be on the audio side of things. It's video only, because it's kind of hard to do a little bit of the film stuff, audio side, but no, go check that out. We did. We appreciate the time with Sam Hubbard, his representatives in Campbell's Chunky Soup. So we have some articles up on Cincy Jungle with the media embedded in those. Go check those out. Go check out the interview. Great guy. And we hope that we brought him some more good juju going forward by being on the show. He's been playing well of late, as has the defense. And, if Higgins doesn't go, they're going to need to continue the kind of games they've been having the last couple of weeks here, the defense. But that's going to do it for us on the Orange and Black Insider Bengals podcast. We are very appreciative. Go get the show on the Believe Podcast Network and the Believe in Cincy podcast channel. Got to resubscribe to that. And of course, go check out our YouTube channel, the Orange and Black Insider, where it has all of our stuff. We put out, I think, 4 things this week alone. We'll probably put out, I keep saying I'm going to do a post-game show. I usually am so good about that, but have not been this season. I apologize. We're going to try and do that, as well as the aftermath and more stuff coming at you. 3 and Outs videos are on that podcast channel as well, so you're going to want to check that out. Take care, everybody. Happy Friday to you all. Have a great weekend. Hopefully the Bengals pull out what should be an entertaining game against the Philadelphia Eagles at Paycor Stadium, getting their first, if you can believe it, their first home win this year in week 8. You got to get that. Take care, everybody. John, I'll see you, buddy.
See you guys.